Marcus stepped through the gates of his new school with a backpack that looked far older than him, its straps frayed from years of being tossed around. His mother had bought him fresh clothes for the first day, hoping he would blend in, but Marcus never cared much about appearances. What mattered to him was surviving quietly, not standing out, not drawing eyes to himself. He was tall for his age, with sharp features, deep brown skin, and a gaze that often made people pause, though he never meant it that way. He wanted peace. He wanted to finish his classes, get good grades, and make his mother proud. But high schools are not kind places for those who look different. Within minutes of stepping inside, Marcus could feel the weight of stares. Whispers traveled faster than footsteps. He was new. He was different. And to some, that was reason enough. A group of boys near the lockers smirked, nudging one another, as if Marcus's very presence was a joke. Marcus pretended not to notice, but deep inside he could already sense the storm that was waiting. The first few classes went by quietly. Marcus kept his head down, answered when called, and avoided eye contact. At lunch, however, the world of teenagers showed its true face. The cafeteria was loud, full of cliques and unspoken rules. Marcus, holding a simple tray with a sandwich and apple, searched for a place to sit. He chose an empty table in the corner, hoping for invisibility. But invisibility is often the first thing bullies attack. A boy with a smug grin walked over, followed by two others. "Hey, new kid," the leader said, his tone sharp, the kind that cuts before words even land. "This table's taken." Marcus looked around. The table was empty. He raised his eyes slowly, meeting the boy's grin without blinking. "I don't see anyone here," Marcus said calmly. The boy's friends laughed. "He talks," one of them said. "And he's funny." Marcus said nothing more. He picked up his tray and moved to another corner, swallowing his pride for the sake of avoiding conflict. His father's voice echoed in his memory. "Never show your cards too early." Sometimes silence is the loudest answer, but teenagers don't respect silence. To the bullies, Marcus had just given them a reason. By walking away, he had marked himself as a target. The next few days grew heavier. The whispers sharpened, jokes about his skin, comments muttered just loud enough for him to hear, a shove in the hallway when teachers weren't looking. His mother noticed the tension in his shoulders at night, the way he stayed quiet at dinner. "Are you making friends, Marcus?" she asked with soft eyes. He nodded, not wanting her to worry. She had sacrificed so much already, leaving behind the chaos of his father's world to give him a chance at normalcy. He couldn't let her carry more burdens. One morning, Marcus arrived at school to find a cruel surprise. Someone had scribbled on his locker in red marker. Ugly words that burned deeper than fists ever could. Students walked past, some laughing, some pretending not to see. Marcus stood there for a moment, his jaw tight, before wiping it clean with his sleeve. He would not give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. In the classroom, however, the teacher noticed his silence. "Marcus, would you read the next passage for us?" she asked gently. Marcus read aloud, his voice steady, each word flowing clearly. The room grew quieter. There was something commanding about his tone, something that made even the bullies listen. For a moment, he wasn't the outsider. He was simply a voice that filled the room. But the moment passed, and whispers returned once the teacher's back was turned. The real turning point of part one came in the cafeteria again. Marcus had learned to sit alone, but that day the bullies wanted more. The leader, the same boy with the smug grin, tossed an apple across the room. It hit Marcus's tray, spilling his food onto the floor. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Marcus looked down at the mess, then slowly lifted his gaze. His eyes locked on the bully, calm yet piercing. He didn't move, didn't shout, didn't curse. He simply held that stare. For the first time, the bully faltered, though only for a second. But to the crowd, it looked like Marcus had done nothing. To them, he was just the quiet new kid who walked away again, picking up his apple and tossing it in the trash. To the bullies, however, something about that calm unsettled them. Later that day, Marcus sat in the library trying to focus on his books. His mind wandered back to his father, the man who ruled over men with fear and loyalty, the man who always told Marcus, "Respect is not taken by shouting. It's taken by how you carry yourself when others test you." Marcus wondered if his father would be disappointed by his silence at school, or perhaps proud that his son was choosing peace. Yet Marcus also knew one thing. Storms don't pass if you keep standing in the rain. Sooner or later, something would break. And when it did, he wasn't sure if he could keep his father's shadow hidden. By the end of the week, the school hallways had grown tense. Students began to notice the small battles between Marcus and the bullies. Some whispered that Marcus wasn't afraid, that there was something different about him. The bullies, frustrated by his calm, started planning something bigger. They wanted to make him crack, to see him fight, to prove he wasn't untouchable. Marcus, walking home under the fading sunset, felt it in the air. Trouble was coming. He could sense it like the smell of rain before a storm. He looked at the sky, whispered a promise to his mother that he would try to stay out of it, and then tightened his fists. Because deep down, he knew, if they crossed the line again, silence might not be enough to stop the fire inside him. The following week at school carried a strange energy. Marcus could feel it in every glance, every whisper that floated around him. Students had started to talk about the way he stared down the bully in the cafeteria, about the way he never raised his voice yet seemed unshaken. Some called him stubborn, others thought he was simply afraid. The truth was that Marcus was holding back, carrying a storm inside him that he didn't want to release. But bullies don't stop when they sense resistance. They push harder, trying to find the breaking point. That morning, as Marcus walked through the main hallway, his footsteps steady and his backpack slung over one shoulder, he felt a sudden shove from behind. He stumbled forward, barely catching his balance before falling. Laughter followed instantly. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The leader and his two friends stood there, laughing loud enough for everyone to hear. "Careful, new kid," the leader said with mock concern. "You almost fell. We wouldn't want you to hurt yourself." Marcus slowly straightened, brushing off his shoulder. He looked at them calmly, his expression unreadable. A few students watched from the lockers, holding their breath. They expected Marcus to fight back, to at least say something. But he didn't. He just turned and kept walking. The leader frowned. To him, silence wasn't strength. It was an insult. By lunchtime, the tension reached its peak. Marcus sat alone at his usual table. His tray carried only bread and water this time. He had stopped bothering with full meals, knowing they might end up on the floor again. The bullies approached like hunters circling prey. The cafeteria grew quieter as students realized something was about to happen. "Hey, Marcus," the leader said, pulling up a chair without asking. He leaned across the table, his grin wide. "You're a quiet guy, huh? Too quiet. Makes me wonder, what are you hiding?" Marcus didn't answer. He broke his bread slowly, chewing without looking up. The bully slammed his hand on the table, making the trays rattle. "I'm talking to you." Finally, Marcus lifted his eyes. They were steady, calm, and far too sharp for a teenager. "And I heard you," he said softly. "But not everything needs an answer." The cafeteria went silent. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Something in Marcus's tone made the bully hesitate. But pride doesn't let you back down in front of an audience. The boy smirked, grabbed Marcus's bread, and took a bite. "Tastes plain, just like you." A few chuckles broke the silence. Marcus leaned back in his chair. "If you need my food to feel full, then take it," he said quietly. "Maybe one day you'll realize hunger doesn't end in your stomach." The bully's grin faltered. For a moment, the students around them felt the air shift. It wasn't just what Marcus said. It was how he said it. Calm, controlled, as if he was speaking from a place of knowledge they couldn't reach. The leader stood abruptly, tossing the bread back on the tray. "You think you're smart, huh? We'll see how smart you are after school." The threat hung heavy. The crowd murmured. Marcus said nothing more. He finished his water, stood, and walked away as if nothing had happened. That evening, Marcus lingered near the school library, pretending to read while waiting for the hallways to clear. He knew what was coming. His father had always taught him to sense danger before it arrived, to watch people's movements, their eyes, their voices, and Marcus could tell the bullies weren't letting this go. Sure enough, as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky with orange streaks, Marcus was cornered behind the gym. The leader stood in front, his friends flanking him. "You think you're better than us?" the leader demanded. "You walk around with that quiet face like you don't care. We're going to make you care." Marcus looked at them, his back straight, his hands loose at his sides. His heart pounded, but not from fear. It was the same pounding he felt whenever his father's men trained him, not to fight for power, but to fight for survival. "I don't want trouble," Marcus said, evenly, "but trouble seems to want me." The leader laughed, stepping closer. "You've got jokes. Let's see if you're still funny when you're on the ground." He shoved Marcus hard against the wall. The two others closed in, their shadows long in the dim light. Marcus's breath thawed. His mind replayed his father's lessons. Control your breathing, control your body, and the rest will follow. He had promised himself not to fight. But as the leader raised a fist, Marcus caught his wrist in one smooth motion. The sound of bone and skin colliding stopped everything. The bully's eyes widened in shock as Marcus's grip tightened like steel. His knees buckled. "Let go!" he hissed, but Marcus didn't. Not yet. Marcus leaned closer, his voice low, almost a whisper. "If you start a fire, don't cry when it burns you." The words carried an edge sharper than any blade. The two other boys froze, unsure of whether to move forward or step back. Marcus released the leader's wrist suddenly, and the boy stumbled, holding his arm with wide eyes. For a moment, the world stood still. The silence behind the gym was louder than the noise inside the cafeteria. Marcus turned and walked away without another word. His steps were calm, but every person who saw him that evening would remember that moment. It wasn't the strength of his grip or the look in his eyes. It was the restraint, the choice to stop when he could have done more. By the next morning, the story had spread. Students whispered in hushed voices. He grabbed his wrist like it was nothing. The guy couldn't even fight back. There's something about him, something scary. The bullies didn't laugh as loudly anymore. The leader avoided. Marcus's gaze, his pride bruised, his wrist still sore. Marcus walked the halls as he always did. Silent, steady, unreadable. But everyone else now looked at him differently. Some with curiosity, some with fear, some with a strange respect. And Marcus knew deep down, this was only the beginning. The story of what happened behind the gym spread faster than any rumor Marcus had heard before. By the next morning, it seemed like the entire school knew about the way he had grabbed the bully's wrist, the way the boy had screamed, and the words Marcus had whispered. For some, it was entertainment. For others, it was a warning. But for Marcus, it was just another burden he carried. He didn't want fame, he didn't want fear. All he wanted was silence and peace. But peace is something high schools rarely allow. The bullies, humiliated in front of their peers, refused to let the matter end there. Pride burned hotter than reason. The leader, still nursing his sore wrist, gathered his friends in whispers and planned their next move. To them, Marcus had embarrassed them, and embarrassment demanded revenge. Marcus noticed the change almost immediately. The laughter in the hallways was sharper, colder. The stares lasted longer. People didn't just see him as the new kid anymore. They saw him as someone who carried something strange, something hidden. Some students stepped aside when he walked by. Others kept their distance. Even teachers seemed to sense a tension in the air, though no one spoke of it directly. At lunch, Marcus sat quietly as usual. He chewed slowly, his gaze fixed on his tray. Across the room, the bullies whispered among themselves. Their eyes burned, with hatred. A few students leaned close to Marcus. "You should be careful," one of them muttered. "They're planning something." Marcus gave a small nod but said nothing. Deep inside, his father's voice echoed again. Control yourself, Marcus. The strongest man is the one who can walk away. But walking away was becoming harder. That afternoon, when classes ended and the schoolyard emptied, Marcus took his usual route home. The air smelled of freshly cut grass, the sound of basketballs echoing from the court nearby. For a moment, he thought the day might pass without trouble. But as he turned a corner, he felt it. Footsteps behind him, too many to ignore. He slowed, then stopped. Going somewhere. The voice was familiar. The leader stepped forward, flanked by his two closest friends and 3 more boys Marcus hadn't seen before. 6 against 1. Their grins were wide, but their eyes carried something darker. Marcus stayed still, his bag hanging loosely from his shoulder. He looked at them, calm as ever. I'm going home, he said. Not yet. You're not, the leader sneered. He rolled his wrist, wincing slightly, but his grin returned. You think you embarrassed me in front of the whole school? You think people respect you now? We'll see what they say when you're the one crawling on the ground. The others laughed, circling him like wolves. Marcus's chest rose and fell slowly. He counted his breath, steadying himself. He didn't want this, not here, not now. But trouble had found him again, and it wasn't leaving without a fight. One of the new boys stepped forward first. He shoved Marcus's shoulder hard. Marcus didn't move. Another tried to snatch his bag, but Marcus pulled it back calmly. The laughter grew louder, but Marcus's eyes never wavered. He wasn't afraid, and that, more than anything, unsettled them. You think you're tough? The leader said, stepping close, almost nose to nose. You're nothing, just a quiet freak who doesn't know his place. Marcus's jaw tightened. His father's words returned heavier than ever. There will be a moment, son, when walking away is no longer strength. It's weakness. And in that moment, you will know. The leader spat cruel words about Marcus's mother, sharp enough to cut deeper than fists ever could. That was the line, the breaking point. Marcus's eyes darkened. The calm mask cracked. He moved faster than they expected. His hand shot up, grabbing the leader's collar, pulling him close with surprising strength. Gasps erupted from the circle. For the first time, the leader's smirk vanished. Marcus's voice came low, steady, and dangerous. Don't ever speak about my mother again, he said. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The leader froze, his bravado slipping. The other boys hesitated. This wasn't the reaction they expected. Marcus wasn't shouting. He wasn't flailing. He was in control, completely and utterly. One of the friends tried to step in, but Marcus released the leader suddenly, pushing him back with a firm shove. The boy stumbled, barely catching himself. Silence filled the air. You're all loud, Marcus said, his voice carrying like thunder in the quiet street. But loud doesn't make you strong. The boys exchanged nervous glances. For the first time, doubt crept into their eyes. They had come expecting an easy victory, a chance to humiliate the quiet kid. Instead, they had found something else, something they didn't understand. The leader, red with both anger and shame, pointed a trembling finger. This isn't over, he hissed. You'll regret this. Marcus turned, picked up his bag, and walked away. His steps were slow, deliberate. He didn't run. He didn't look back. And that, more than anything, made the bullies realize they had just lost, not in fists, but in spirit. That night, Marcus sat quietly at home, his mother cooking dinner in the kitchen. She hummed softly, unaware of the battles her son fought, in silence. Marcus stared at his hands, remembering the strength he had used, the fire he had felt inside. It scared him, not because he couldn't control it, but because he knew exactly where it came from. His father's shadow loomed large, reminding him of the bloodline he carried. He didn't want to be feared. He didn't want to be like his father. But the world had a way of forcing choices on you. At school the next day, whispers grew louder. Some said Marcus had thrown the bully against the wall. Others claimed he had beaten 3 of them down. The stories grew larger with each retelling. Marcus said nothing, neither confirming nor denying. But his silence only made the rumors more powerful. The bullies, humiliated again, plotted in anger. But deep down, fear had already begun to spread through them. They had seen something in Marcus's eyes that day, something cold, something unshakable. And Marcus knew this was only the beginning. The fight behind the gym changed everything, even though fists had barely been thrown. By the next morning, the story had grown into something bigger than Marcus could have imagined. Students whispered in hallways, passing on versions of the event that were half truth and half myth. Some said Marcus had thrown 3 boys to the ground at once. Others swore he had broken the leader's arm in one move. Each retelling made him sound less like a quiet new kid and more like someone dangerous, someone untouchable. Marcus walked through the corridors as he always did, calm and steady, his bag hanging from one shoulder. But this time, the air shifted when he entered a room. Conversations stopped. Eyes followed him. Some students stepped aside quickly as if afraid to brush against him. Others stared with a mix of curiosity and fear. The bullies were no longer laughing. The leader wore a scowl on his face, his wrist wrapped in a bandage. His friends whispered constantly, their voices low, their eyes darting toward Marcus whenever they thought he wasn't looking. Humiliation burned in them, but something else had crept in too. Fear. By lunchtime, the rumors had taken a new turn. A group of students sat near the vending machines, speaking in hushed tones. "You know who his father is, right?" one whispered. "What do you mean?" another asked, leaning closer. "I heard his dad's connected." "Like, connected?" The words spread like wildfire. "Mafia?" someone muttered. "His father's a mafia boss." No one knew exactly where the rumor started. Maybe it was one of the boys who had recognized Marcus's last name. Maybe it was just a lucky guess, fueled by his quiet strength and the way he carried himself. But by the end of the day, almost everyone had heard the story. The new kid wasn't just different. He was the son of someone powerful, someone dangerous. Marcus didn't confirm it. He didn't deny it. He simply moved through the day as though nothing had changed. But inside, his stomach twisted. This was exactly what he had feared. He had wanted to stay invisible, to keep his father's shadow far away from this new life. Now that shadow stretched across every hallway, every classroom, every whispered word. The bullies were the most shaken. The leader sat at his lunch table, poking at his food but not eating. His friends pressed him. "Is it true? Did you hear? His last name? That's the name of—" "Shut up," the leader snapped, though his eyes betrayed unease. They remembered the look in Marcus's eyes, the grip of his hand. It wasn't just strength, it was control. Control that came from somewhere deeper, somewhere trained. They began to wonder, had they picked the wrong target? That week, the teachers started noticing the strange silence whenever Marcus entered a room. One teacher pulled him aside. "Marcus, is everything all right? The other students seem different around you." Marcus looked at her quietly. "I'm fine, ma'am," he said. But he wasn't. At home, he sat at the dinner table with his mother, barely touching his food. She noticed immediately. "You're quieter than usual," she said gently. "Did something happen at school?" Marcus hesitated. His mother had left his father's world behind to give him safety, to give him a chance at a normal life. He didn't want to worry her. "It's nothing," he lied softly. "Just school stuff." But the truth was heavier. The truth was that the walls of school life were closing in around him. The bullies who once mocked him now avoided his gaze. The students who once laughed at him now treated him like a ghost they didn't dare touch. Even the principal seemed to watch him differently, as if afraid of what trouble his presence might bring. The reveal of who Marcus might be spread beyond the students. Parents began to hear whispers from their children. "There's a boy at school," they said at dinner tables. "His dad is dangerous." Some parents called the school, asking questions in careful tones. Others told their children to stay away. Marcus noticed the shift most clearly when he sat alone in the cafeteria one day, and a boy from his math class approached timidly. "Hey," the boy said nervously. Uh, I just wanted to say, if you ever need anything, like I've got your back. Marcus looked up confused. Why? The boy swallowed. Because, well, people say your dad is powerful, and I think it's smart to be on your side. Marcus sighed, staring at his tray. This was not respect. This was fear dressed up as loyalty. Later that afternoon, the bullies made one last attempt to act normal. The leader approached Marcus at his locker, his friends trailing behind. His tone was different this time, forced, almost shaky. Hey, about the other day, he said, scratching the back of his neck. We were just messing around, no hard feelings, right? Marcus closed his locker slowly and looked at him. His eyes were calm, steady, unreadable. No hard feelings, he said softly. But the leader knew, and Marcus knew, that things would never go back to the way they were. The balance had shifted. For the rest of that week, Marcus felt the weight of a new world pressing on him. He wasn't just Marcus anymore. He was Marcus, the Mafia boss's son. Whether true or exaggerated, the rumor had taken a life of its own, and nothing he could say would change it. He lay awake at night, staring at the ceiling, hearing his father's voice, in his memory. Power isn't in the fists you throw, Marcus. Power is in the silence that makes others step back. At school, he saw that truth playing out. Students who once mocked him now walked on the other side of the hallway. The bullies who once shoved him now whispered apologies. Teachers looked at him with cautious eyes. Marcus had wanted to be invisible, but now he was unavoidable. And though he carried himself with calm restraint, he knew one thing with certainty. Once the world saw you in a certain light, it could never unsee it. Days after the rumor settled were unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced. The same hallways that once echoed with laughter at his expense now grew quiet when he passed. Students who once tripped him or shoved him aside now stepped out of his way. Some lowered their eyes, others whispered, but none dared to touch him. For Marcus, it was a strange kind of victory, one he had never asked for. At first, he thought he might enjoy it. No more jokes, no more spilled food, no more cruel words whispered behind his back. But the silence carried something heavier than the laughter ever did. It wasn't respect, it was fear. Fear of who they thought he was. Fear of the shadow that followed him, the shadow of his father. Marcus's mother noticed the change as well. When she asked about school, he told her it was fine, but his eyes betrayed him. She had seen that look before, the same heavy stare his father carried when he returned from nights Marcus wasn't allowed to ask about. It hurt her to see it, now in her son. One evening, she sat him down at the table. The kitchen light flickered softly, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound between them. Marcus, she said, her voice low but firm. I moved us here so you could have a chance at something different, not to carry his shadow, not to repeat his life. Marcus looked down at his hands, remembering the grip he had used on the bully, the way fear had filled the boy's eyes. I didn't want it to be this way, he whispered. I tried to stay quiet, but they wouldn't stop. And now, everyone thinks I'm dangerous. Like him. His mother reached across the table, taking his hand. You are not your father. You don't need his power to survive. You only need your own strength. And real strength is not making people fear you. It's making them see who you really are. Her words stayed with him. The next day at school, Marcus walked into the cafeteria. As usual, the crowd parted slightly. Whispers rippled through the tables. But instead of sitting alone, Marcus made a choice. He walked to the table where the bullies sat, the same boys who had tormented him, who had mocked his skin, who had tried to break him. They froze, their trays untouched, their eyes wide. Marcus set his tray down gently and sat across from them. The silence was so thick you could hear the hum of the vending machine across the room. The leader shifted uncomfortably, his bandaged wrist resting against the table. What do you want? He muttered. Marcus looked at him calmly. Nothing. I just want to eat. The boys exchanged glances, confused, no threats, no anger, no talk of revenge, just quiet. For the first time, the leader's eyes softened, if only slightly. He expected Marcus to gloat, to intimidate, to claim victory. Instead, Marcus showed restraint. And in that restraint, he revealed something none of them had ever seen before: real strength. By the end of the week, things began to shift. Slowly, students realized Marcus wasn't using his father's name. He wasn't making threats. He wasn't looking for power. He was just living, just like them. The fear eased, replaced by something closer to respect. True respect. Not for his last name, but for the way he carried himself. The bullies never truly became his friends, but they stopped mocking him. They stopped testing him, and in time their silence became its own form of apology. One afternoon, as Marcus left school, the leader caught up to him. For the first time, his voice carried no arrogance, no false bravado. "Hey, about everything," he said quietly. "I was wrong." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Marcus nodded once. "We all make mistakes," he said simply, then walked away. At home, Marcus sat by his window that night watching the city lights blink in the distance. He thought of his father, of the world he came from, of the name that now hung over him like a shadow, and he thought of his mother, of the life she was trying to build for him. He knew the whispers would never fully disappear. There would always be rumors, always be questions. But he also knew something more important. He didn't need his father's power to be respected. He didn't need fear to survive. All he needed was the strength to stand tall when others tried to push him down, and the wisdom to know when silence spoke louder than fists. The next morning, Marcus walked into school with the same steady steps he always had. But this time the weight on his shoulders felt lighter. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't mocked anymore. He wasn't feared anymore. He was simply Marcus. And that was enough.